With Heather Langenkamp returning for the Midnight Club in 2022, there's been murmurs about a possible Elm Street reboot, especially after she said this in a recent interview.
If Nancy could fight Freddy one last time, I would really like that. I'd love to see a future in that. I mean, I've been really watching, the Halloween sagas, spin out, and I love watching Jamie Lee Curtis get to play that part. At this age where I think we have so much to give to those storylines.
And with both Halloween and Scream getting sequels, requels, reboots, it feels like Elm Street just got left behind. For good reasons or bad reasons, you decide. And is it even possible with Freddy's backstory and origin where they left off? Today, let's dissect the 9 Nightmare on Elm Street movies, talk about the origin of Freddy, what his storyline actually was, who he was, and how each movie ended, wrapping up how the entire franchise is seen now. And of course, I'm gonna rank these ones just for fun as we go along, so make sure to leave yours down below in the comments. We're talking about official Freddy films today, so no spin-offs, just pure Freddy lore. And it makes sense to dive in chronologically where it all began, so let's dive right in. Spoilers ahead. A Nightmare on Elm Street, written and directed by Wes Craven, wastes no time, opening with a dream sequence chase scene with Krueger himself. Going straight into a lullaby, we know 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you. In this one, we follow a group of high schoolers, our lead being Nancy Thompson, played by Heather Langenkamp, Glenn Lance, played by Johnny Depp, and Tina Gray, played by Amanda Weiss. And of course, this film launched Robert Englund into horror stardom, as he becomes an icon playing Freddy Krueger. Fun fact, at the time of filming this, Robert Englund has over 171 acting credits to his name, which is insane. Lin Shaye also features in this film as the teen's teacher. The film has a quick setup that is effective and unnerving from the jump. Not only does it open to a nightmare, but all the characters quickly discover that they're having the same types of nightmares, and they feature the same figure, a man with gloves made of blades. And this mystery villain starts shredding the teens one by one. The true inspiration for Freddy came from several sources within Wes Craven's childhood, including a boy who bullied him that also shared his paper route. This boy was named Fred Krueger. The original Nightmare on Elm Street also has the classic lead killer, one first attributed to Psycho. This was made a staple later in the Scream series, which is also referred to as the opening kill. We start with Tina, the main character, and it's not long before she's killed off in an iconically gruesome manner while shredded on the roof. And of course, Nancy now takes main stage and becomes the final girl affiliated with the series. Heather beat out 200 actresses to get the role of Nancy, including Debbie Moore and Courtney Cox, which would have changed everything down the line in Scream. The movie is well known for its horrifying death scenes, including Johnny Depp and of course his crop top, the bath scene, and the body bag at school. And although it has its fair share of bloody deaths, the movie also has something else that sets it apart: the marriage of teen splatter and endless twisted imagination. Because of Freddy's supernatural ability within nightmares, he can become anything, which opens the door for creativity and at times campiness. But this happens a little bit later down the timeline. The film's basic principle is that there's someone haunting our dreams and we must stay awake. No longer is it the boogeyman breaking in, he was already within you, waiting. No home intruder needed, the concept is foolproof. And because of the paranormal aspect, loopholes fall to the wayside. He has no rules and no boundaries. What we do learn from the first entry is that Freddy can physically harm anyone he meets in the dream world, but you can also harm him or even bring items back into the waking world, which is what Nancy discovers when she brings Freddy's hat back. And then it's brought to light the connection between this mysterious killer and the town. It's revealed to Nancy by her mother that this man haunting her dreams was a local child murderer who killed at least 20 children in the neighborhood. They caught him, but because of a technicality, he was released from custody due to a search warrant not being signed. The parents in the neighborhood were furious and they tracked him down in an abandoned boiler room, which was the crime scene where he used to take kids. As an angry mob, they lit it on fire with him inside, killing him, but not before taking his glove as a trophy. I'm really not sure why you would want these blades that also kill children, but okay. And I want to make it clear, there is no mention of sexual abuse within this film, although it was said to be in the original script, and we will touch on this later in the series. Nancy, of course, outsmarts Freddy thanks to some innovative booby traps. She purposefully summons him into her dreams and pulls him into the real world. And Freddy is no match for her little tricks. She does everything from tripping him with wire to splashing him with flammable liquid. But Freddy gets the last laugh when he takes Heather's mum with him in a heartbreaking scene which depicts her being lowered into a grave. We then have a fake out ending where Nancy and her mum appear outside well rested, and Nancy jumps into a car with her friends, who we believed had already died. Maybe it was all a dream. But we quickly notice the convertible top is striped like Freddy's sweater, and then her mum is pulled through the door by him. There's actually two other alternative endings with Freddy not appearing at all, and honestly, I would have rathered that. I am not a fan of the way that they ended this film. There was so much tension, so much action, and so much build-up, and the fact that it just ends on this kind of cliffhanger. The movie plays on the idea of what dreams truly are, the unknown mystery behind them.
The truth is, we still don't know what they are or where they come from.
The film also holds elements of trauma, and we'll see this throughout the series. This can be seen in literal ways and symbolic. We literally see the actions of Nancy's mum, who is an alcoholic, which can be interpreted into drinking to deal with the pain of what happened with Freddy. In fact, most of the adults in this film are like this. Robert Englund said in Nightmare, all the adults are damaged. They're alcoholic, they're on pills, they're not around. And Ronnie Blakely, who plays the mother, said they verge on being villains. But then also, the nightmares are symbolic for fears and traumatic experiences that teens have, feeling out of control, vulnerable, and then rebelling against that and taking control of it for the first time. As corny as it sounds, it's about believing yourself and never doubting your own mind. Nancy is the only one who really knows what's going on and accepts the truth, which leads her to be the only one able to control her mind and dismiss the existence of Freddy, allowing him to have no power over her, which of course is kind of ruined by the last scene. My favorite part of this film is the body bag scenes. Being haunted by your best friend in a body bag is one of the most heartbreaking and terrifying things imaginable. But also, love this moment when Nancy pulls out her spare drip coffee machine underneath her bed, as you do. I think that this film is genuinely scary because we don't know too much about him. The film holds a mysterious element for Freddy, and his boundless unpredictability really keeps the viewers on the edge of their seat for the first viewing. This is before we even knew what to expect from him. All we knew is that his energy was unmatched and boundless. And as us, the viewer, we also dream. I love this film even though I'm not a fan of the abrupt ending, but there's no question where it goes on my ranking list. A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge wasn't just any sequel. The film is a cult classic in its own right, but not for the reasons you'd expect. In fact, most audiences were at first very underwhelmed by the film, and then it started to gain negative feedback because of the heavy and unexpected queer theme, which it was scrutinized for, especially because of the time of release and what was going on in 80s America. But years later, it found its audience, and like all good cult classics, it took years for it to get the appreciation it truly deserves. The film has its own documentary I would really recommend. It's called Scream Queen, My Nightmare on Elm Street, which discusses the lead actor Mark Patton, the homoerotic themes of the film, and how he was affected as he is a gay man. Patton had a remarkable early career before the film, but retired after the film and was only found by a private investigator during the filming of a documentary on the Elm Street franchise. Some of the cast still stand by the fact that they did not see the gay messaging in the film. Even the director claims that he did not understand the themes of the script, even after shooting in one of the biggest gay bars in LA. And only 7 minutes into me rewatching this film, I felt like the message was loud and clear. There is no subtlety in it. Years later, the writer David Chaskin admitted to his true intentions with the script. Yes, there certainly was some intentional subtext, but it was intended to be homophobic rather than homoerotic. I thought about the demographics for these types of films, young heterosexual males, and tried to imagine what kinds of things things would truly frighten them to the core. Scary dreams that make them even more momentarily question their own sexuality seemed like a slam dunk to me. If you really wanted to have fun, one might argue that the entire movie is a metaphor, and Jesse in the end is able to control his monster inside of him with the love of a good woman. I found this quote from the website bloodygoodhorror.com, and I'm truly appalled by the intent for this film, but luckily it had the opposite effect. And this was embraced by the queer community, who have turned Patton into a horror icon in his own right. Although a lot of damage was done in the process, again, I highly recommend the documentary. People argue that this is the only Elm Street film in which the lead character is a man, but we do touch on this later in the franchise. I think what people mean by this is it's a true final man in this film, and Freddy only appears in it for 13 minutes, although the body count is high in comparison with 10 deaths, and this is because of the possession element. The film follows teenager Jesse, who's just moved into the house from the original film, and since moving in, the nightmares have begun. A conversation with a peer attempts to wrap up the ending for the first family.
Some chick was locked in there by her mother and she went crazy. She watched her boyfriend get butchered across the street by some maniac.
But Nancy does leave a trail behind that Jesse and his quote-unquote love interest, Lisa, find. This is Nancy's old diary, which points them in the right direction to investigate Freddy's origin story. But Freddy throws a spanner into the works when he switches to a new tactic to continue to terrorize the small town. He attempts to possess Jesse to enter the waking world. I mean, we're only on the second film and Freddy has started moving goalposts. He interferes with the real world, causing the house to heat up, and he also kills the family pets. We learn in this one that there may be more ways Freddy can interfere with our world than just our dreams. And of course, nothing is as it seems. The film ends with Lisa helping to release Jesse from Freddy's grip by believing in him and really smooching him, even though he was under the Freddy mask, showing her true love and respect for him. Jesse then mirrors the first ending with a walkout scene where his mum is saying goodbye to him as he returns back to school. But oh no, not everything is as it seems. It's Elm Street. While on the bus, Freddy reaches through a pier, straight through her stomach, and the bus goes off the road. Cut to credits. The themes in this film are extremely heavy. There's no subtlety at all. At one point, the coach is brought out of a gay club, tied up, stripped naked, and spanked by possessed Jesse. The original Elm Street story is about coming into your own and the symbolic fears and traumatic experiences that teens have. Freddy's revenge reflects the challenge of coming out and accepting your own sexuality, or as the writer attempted to put it, repressing yourself. But if we do see it as a film about repression, Freddy always wins in the end, and there's no escaping who you really are. So that theory kind of falls down fast in a good way. What we love about horror is it's all about exploring real and intense truths held by people who are usually silenced, people who feel like outsiders and othered. And this film lives on as something else to many people, something other than what it was intended to be, and I think that that's really beautiful. And then you have the way that the family reacts to Jesse's realization. While his mother knows that he is struggling and wants to get him therapy, the dad blames drugs for his changes, insinuating that something must be wrong with him. Once again, we have adults out of their element, and I feel like it's not going to be the last time. Robert Englund said that this is his least favorite Elm Street film, and I couldn't disagree more. The film has some amazing transformations, with Freddy growing from the inside out. Matched with the openness of the coach's sexuality and the strong theme of coming out, the film goes where many 80s films never dreamt to. It crosses all the lines. Having a lead queer character in an 80s film, taking what was seen as a macho horror icon and giving it oozy layers, it's all pros for me. And it's also quite terrifying. This line gets me every time.
Kill me, Lisa. Please kill me.
The film has such a dark and dramatic tone that strikes terror in a new way. Although Freddy has minimal screen time, he is not afraid to walk among the living and expose himself to the outside world, which is truly terrifying when the boogeyman comes out from the darkness. Plus, these little beasts were always a surrealist dream, which I'm all about. I think that this film was underappreciated, and to a certain degree, I feel like it's still that way, but for a sequel, it does pretty well. So I'm putting it here in my ranking. In Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Robert Englund is back as Freddy, and so is his original nemesis. Heather Langenkamp is back playing Nancy Thompson. But our true final girl is Kristen, played by Patricia Arquette, who opens the film with a nightmare chase scene, of course. Freddy is back to his old ways, and Kristen is haunted by his victims who tell her the story of who he is. The film wastes no time getting into theatrics, which in this film are very dark, as Freddy makes her harm herself, putting her into a psychiatric facility. In this one, Nancy is a sleep specialist at the hospital. And because she's back, we finally get an answer to what happened to her family.
My mother passed away. She died in her sleep. My father and I, well, things just seemed to fall apart after that.
Nancy's role in this film is to help a group of troubled teens who are suffering from Freddy's nightmares. Here they go into the dream world together to attempt to beat him at his own game. The film has some really epic Freddy scenes, including the Freddy TV, the eating whole scene, in which Nancy comes face to face with Freddy again for the first time, and the puppet scene is just agonizing to watch. Because the film has a heavy focus on mental health, it is a really dark entry that focuses on the trauma felt by the group. Especially because, like most of the other films, most of the adults are useless, even though they work in a facility where they're meant to help.
We'll start a policy of evening sedation for everybody.
The fuck you will!
We learn a lot about Freddy's backstory in this one, and it's very intense and unexpected. A mysterious nun explains that the worst of the criminally insane were locked up in a section of the facility, and a young staff member was accidentally locked inside with them over the holidays. And here she was sexually assaulted by the patients. She was found pregnant and barely alive, and this was Freddy's mum, Amanda Krueger. Not long after, she gave birth to Freddy. We are also given a new solution to kill Freddy for once and for all, by finding his remains and burying them in hallowed ground. We learn later that the nun who told us all of this is actually a ghost, and she's the ghost of Amanda Krueger, of course. And I found this moment to be key when Freddy asks the child's souls he collects to give him strength.
Of the children, give me strength.
It's a deviation from the inferred motive that he's just a child killer. In this film, the story changes to him being a child of maniacs and evil that was doomed from the start. This film ends with the doctor teaming up with Nancy's dad to find Freddy's remains, and in an unexpected and surrealist, zany, only Elm Street fashion, they battle his skeleton remains in a junkyard, while the teens and Nancy battle him within a dream. The doctor helping manages to spread holy water on the corpse, but it's just too late, and Freddy finally kills Nancy. And it's then revealed that the nun was the ghost of Amanda, before we have a little light on moment to signify that Freddy is not gone after all. The movie touches on past themes and even goes so far as to simplify the meaning for us.
You won't make any progress until you recognize your dreams for what they are. Psychological scars.
But I do think it's an obvious look at the personal mental health battles that teens face and how they go unnoticed. We also have more characters dealing with Freddy at the same time in this entry, which leads to Freddy finding personal ways to attack them, including one girl struggling with an addiction who Freddy attacks with needles. Surprisingly, I really enjoyed this entry. It does feel a lot darker than the others due to its graphic backstory and the troubled teens who are hurting themselves, but it focuses on the taboos of mental health and how teens are unable to express themselves, calling out for what they need while doctors minimalize their issues. I ultimately place this film here on the list because of its dark and surrealist fight scenes, and I do want to mention this is the last for the franchise for a while that has a Wes Craven writing credit. The Dream Master takes place 3 years after the last film, but still follows the remaining characters from the Dream Warriors. These are the teens in the hospital who worked with Nancy to battle Freddy, but they're the ones who also unfortunately witnessed her death. Kristen, Joey, and Roland once again face their fears when Freddy re-emerges from their dreams. Kristen shares the center of the story with her best friend Alice, who is struggling to gain control of her life. We see Freddy resurrect himself in the junkyard his remains were buried in at the end of number 3, taking revenge on the remaining members who were involved in his demise 3 years ago. And this time, Alice holds the key. Her obsession with daydreaming to escape her problems comes in useful and is the only thing that gives her a sense of control in the world. The overall reaction to this film was positive, and I think that's pretty good for the fourth in a franchise. It was praised for its improved special effects and practical effects, and of course creativity. That's what I think is the coolest thing about Freddy films. The possibilities with dreams are endless. Alice adds more into this film than just a solution of how to control your dreams. Alice takes over when lead Kristen is killed by Freddy, and they really have an impactful way of showing the immense body count that Freddy has had over the years at the gravesite. I don't know if you've noticed, but basically every Nightmare on Elm Street has a funeral scene. I've realized this is just a go-to favorite for the franchise. Freddy loves a good funeral. The ending for this one might be my favorite thus far. Alice is able to defeat Krueger by using the children's souls against him through his reflection. As she says, evil will see itself and die. The souls of the children reach up, tearing him apart, and in turn, they are set free. We then transition into a later scene where Alice is with her crush, and for the first time, there's no hint to Freddy's survival. Alice walks away, happily ever after, credits roll. Very peaceful. I loved the message in this one because it's what the first one tried to do, but because Alice is more meek and unable to stand up for herself, we get a greater payoff with the arc because of course Nancy was always confident and outspoken. You've got to love an edgy leather jacket makeover, move over Sandy, but we see the difference physically and mentally within Alice. Alice is also able to use her inner strength of dissociating and daydreaming against Freddy. It's all about harnessing what's already inside of you. Honestly, I didn't hate this film. I thought it was okay, especially for the fourth film in the franchise. But I'm really impressed by the way that these films have been able to maintain their appeal. They know what works and they go all out to keep it shocking and surprising, but they still deliver that Freddy format that everyone loves. The film works even though it's on a little bit of shaky ground, but I absolutely love the ending, so it goes here in my ranking. 1989 was a good year for horror, but for Freddy, it took a little bit of a turn. He went a little bit baby crazy. Alice returns to Elm Street after her heroic ending in Dream Master, and usually we open to a dream sequence. It's here I realized that Elm Street is the only franchise where it was all a dream is a horrifying notion. Alice dreams of herself as Freddy's mother, Amanda, who was brutally assaulted, and this is because of the parallels in her current life, because in this entry, of course, spoiler alert, Alice finds out she's pregnant. And how does Freddy get back? He uses the dreams of her unborn fetus baby. Yes, new lows. In one of these nightmares, Alice follows a nun who we know to be Amanda Krueger as she lures her into the vivid dreams. Here we see baby Freddy as a mutant being born. And just like that, Freddy is back. Amanda tells Alice that she needs to find Amanda's soul and remains in order to set her free to defeat Freddy once again. So in this one, Alice's main goal is to find Amanda. There's some pretty intense moments in this one, including Alice's boyfriend's death. Even though the green screen effects fall a little short, the rest is intense and dark. Her friend Greta also suffers a horrendous fate. This movie feels like more of a genuine continuation of the storylines than anything we've seen before. As an outsider, it doesn't really work as a standalone film or one that you can just kind of watch off the cuff. We're too deep in the weeds. There are some great scenes within this film, but a lot of the creative scenes rely on green screen, as I mentioned before, which feels outdated in comparison to the practical effects. They weave in some comic book aspects, and they do this with one of Alice's friends, but it's kind of tacked on, and it would have been really cool to dive into this completely with its own storyline. Although the final fight scene is extremely epic, and of course it's the one thing that the audience will remember the film for. What we get from 5 is almost the precise rundown of Freddy's backstory thus far.
That baby grew up to be Freddy Krueger, who murdered 20 or 30 kids, but the courts cut him loose on a technicality. So the parents of the murdered kids got together and killed him. But that was just the beginning. He keeps on killing.
And later, with the help of friends' research, we find out how Amanda passed.
She spent the rest of her life in the asylum. After Krueger's trial, she flipped out and hung herself. So they thought.
Meaning?
Meaning they couldn't prove it.
The film may not be as strong as the others, but it does a good job of summing up Freddy's current origin story. You'll see why I said that later. The film ends with Alice's friends finding Amanda's resting place and releasing her to take Freddy back to the grave one last time again. As per usual Freddy fashion, the characters' death scenes in this film are themed by the pressures put on them, and because this film takes place around their graduation time, there's more pressures than ever. I was actually surprised that they didn't focus on any fears Alice had about becoming a mother, but the film overall feels like a transition film building the storyline. It doesn't have the same arc as previous entries, particularly because other than the baby, there's no real changes in Alice, and there's no arc for really any of the characters. I'm still positive about this entry, but it built more backstory with a lack of conflict and solution. It's feeling like the goalposts are moved again, and Freddy can really use anything to bring him back, so how can any of these films really end peacefully? I mean, this time we saw a baby bring him back, but in saying that, we did get baby Freddy out of this one, which is a treasure in itself. With the franchise beginning to run out of steam and the same return and banish cycle, we meet the final nightmare, the last film in this long chapter of Freddy. The film immediately has a different vibe, and although it's only 1991 and we still have Robert Englund as our Freddy, we have entered 90s horror wholeheartedly. This is New Line Cinema's first film in 3D, and our 80s pop has been transferred into softer 90s grunge as we open to our first ever pre-explanation. Mysterious killings and suicides wipe out entire population of children and teenagers. Remaining adults are experiencing mass psychosis. There is new evidence of one surviving teenager. I don't know about you, but this is a little bit of a confusing setup, and it feels unlike anything we've seen before from the franchise, and that is because it is. The final nightmare changes the backstory as we know it. We then go into a plain nightmare where we literally fall into the character we will only know as John Doe, who cannot escape Freddy in his nightmares and is chased into Springwood. Even he has no idea who he is. Here we meet Spencer, played by Breckin Meyer, Carlos, and Tracy, who live in a shelter for troubled youth. And in this film, one of their doctors, Maggie, tries to help the kids get to the bottom of Freddy's tricks. This film has the most erratic storyline yet. Get ready. We've even got Freddy referencing the Wizard of Oz. He's really gone off the deep end in this one. The acting is also very inconsistent.
Where are you from?
I don't know!
And the melting storyline of this lost teenager meeting up with this new group of teens is just the tip of the iceberg of the mess, because in this film we discover that Freddy had a little girl, which ends up being Maggie, the doctor that's helping them all. For some reason, Freddy pushed this John Doe character into a new town so he could bleed this new location dry of teen souls. But this doesn't make any sense considering we ended happily ever after in the last episode, and the town was thriving, full of teenagers and a child at that point. To add to the zany atmosphere, we get some very interesting cameos, including Roseanne Barr, and Johnny even makes an appearance. We end up learning a lot more about this backstory. Freddy didn't just have a child, he had a wife and a white picket fence, and it appears that his wife found out about the child abductions. But honestly, that's not all, and you'll want to be sitting down for this. We learn about the 3 dream demons.
Because they promised me that. They, the dream people, the ones that gave me this job.
These are said to haunt the dreams of the living until they find the most twisted mind and they give it power to cross the line, turning nightmares into reality. So now not only is Freddy out for revenge after he was burnt alive by the parents of the town, but it's his official job too, and it only gets worse. The film goes back into Freddy's memories to reveal him as a child killing animals and being bullied. He also self-mutilates as a teen. We see his adopted father beat him while Freddy enjoys it. Flash forward to the fire that killed him, we watch the dream demons enter him. The film ends with Maggie using Krueger's glove against him and causing him to explode, which was all for the 3D, no doubt. And then that's it. She has her famous line. She says,
Freddy's dead.
With a smirk, and they end the chapter. Credits roll. As for the themes in this entry, we have our reoccurring visual representation of trauma within nightmares, as Carlos, who is deaf, is tortured by his mother by putting an object deep into his ear canal, inferring that this is how he lost his hearing. Robert Englund said that this is one of his favorite kill scenes in the whole series. It's a prolonged nightmare that is really effective with the loss of sound, and perhaps it's the best part of the film. Tracy's dream, on the other hand, is meant to infer that her father assaulted her. The film, with all of its flaws, does a good job at representing trauma within nightmares, and truly, at this point, that's all we can ask for an Elm Street film. There's just too much going on in this entry. The characters die as fast as they're introduced, nothing is set up for the audience to get grips on, and we get such wild information about Freddy that he is no longer a mystery, and I still don't know how I feel about the dream demon aspect. It's sad to know that Peter Jackson was actually asked to write the draft script for this film, but it was never used. I understand why fans are conflicted with this one. It's a lot to ask people to change everything they know about their beloved kooky icon in the last film of the series with a whole new cast. There's no question in my ranking where this one lands for me. And now it's time for a much needed refresh with New Nightmare, which is a standalone film within the franchise, but returning to basics with Wes Craven writing, directing, and starring Heather Langenkamp, Robert Englund, and Wes Craven. And all of them this time as themselves, because this isn't a reboot, this is a meta horror. This standalone film aims to make Krueger less comical and more terrifying, as he is a fictional movie villain who invades the real world after Craven starts working on a new script. Craven's words have huge power as he writes Heather's family into danger, including her son Dylan, played by Miko Hughes. And our friend Freddy gets a complete makeover, which Wes Craven claimed is more of what he originally intended for the character. It feels very similar to the original film, especially with the brutality of the death scenes. Robert Englund is so fantastic in this because, unlike other meta horrors that we will see in future years, it's so rare to see a villain out of a mask, and it also touches on the idea about what fans think about how franchises operate. The film is the longest in the franchise, being 1 hour and 52 minutes, and it uses this time to set up the characters properly for once, but we still get our famous opening dream sequence, and of course the funeral scenes are back. The film has plenty of Easter eggs from previous films, and Lynn Shay even returns to the series as a nurse. The film ends with Nancy going full force into Freddy's lair. Here she defeats Freddy by trapping him and burning him, much like the parents did in the original film. Now she's the parent saving her son. Again, we gotta do the meta. And the end is ultra meta, where we have Wes thanking Heather for playing Nancy one last time and trapping him inside the film, like he was real all along and Wes had created the other films to hold him inside. So what is the messaging and themes behind this one? Well, Wes describes this new script that he is writing within the film about being about an entity that is very old, and it exists in different forms and different times, and it lives for the murder of innocents. He goes on to say that the way to capture this entity is by making a story around it, capturing it within that story like a genie in a bottle. But if the story is not strong enough, it's not original, or it's watered down or suppressed by a rating process, the evil is free.
However it happens when the story dies, the evil is set free.
Craven is telling the audience how to create a horror legend and how it will live on forever as an icon if it's captured right. I love it. The film also has a focus on mental health, as Heather worries that her son might be battling with mental health issues when his temperament starts to change during the haunting, leading to her reflecting on her family's mental health and her own. And the nurses also double down on this, treating her like she's unhinged and unsafe.
Have you been seeing him?
No.
Even though this film has more of a serious tone, it's still got some insane practical effects, and the meta wraparound makes it one of the most concise and satisfying films in the entire series. It's a great payoff for fans, especially those who admire the original. But from one extreme to the next, now we enter a crossover. Yep, I didn't cut any corners. This is Robert Englund's final role at this time, filming as Krueger, and it's the meeting of two major horror franchises as they face off against each other: Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees. We start the film with a recap of Freddy's origin story, setting us up to return where the final nightmare left off in 1991. We follow Freddy bragging about his new plan to come back after being defeated. Now he is going to use Jason to make the citizens of Springwood remember him, and he does this by possessing Jason's mum, Pamela Voorhees, and calling Jason from the grave. But then Jason starts killing off the victims that Freddy wanted to torture, and it's just a mess. It's a battle to the death. From jump, we're out of our element. Everything feels different. But of course, this is a continuation of the final nightmare in 1991, and now it's 2003, and the horror landscape has changed immensely. They're breaking all the rules.
Because somebody's definitely breaking the fucking reality rules, okay?
We meet our main characters, Catherine Isabel as Gib, Monica Keena as Laurie, and Kelly Rowland as Kia. And the setup is completely different to any of the other entries, taking the time to establish these new characters, juxtaposing their personalities and their weaknesses, setting up for each character's arc. Something that needs to be noted: a sex scene, a shower scene, and a skinny dipping scene were all shown within the first 15 minutes of this film. But this had nothing to do with Freddy. Of course, this is because Jason Voorhees and his rules within his own franchise. With all of this said, it is not a straightforward storyline by any means, but at least this time it makes sense. Stay with me. Laurie's ex Will, who witnessed Freddy in the past, has been institutionalized and sees Laurie's house on the news after the first slashing. He breaks out of the psych ward with his friend, who is the only other person who remembers Freddy, and we find out later, while they were in there, they were giving medication to stop them from dreaming. What happened was that the town decided to erase from history what happened to them to keep Freddy at bay. If no kids are scared, then no kids can invite him into their dreams. But we find out that the reason Will was removed is because he knows the dark truth not only about Freddy, but about what happened to Laurie's mum. He is very much the damaged, handsome, mysterious type, and she's the only thing he cares about. It's very cliche. But it's also really interesting having this human main story, if you will, alongside of these fighting villains. The storyline is creative and dark. I mean, I never thought I'd see a Destiny's Child give mouth to mouth to Jason Voorhees, just so he could live long enough to end Freddy for once and for all. But I also have to point out, unfortunately, I never thought I'd hear Kelly Rowland call Freddy the F slur. And yes, that did happen, but don't worry, she gets hers. Even though this is a verse movie, it's very much Freddy's world. It's all about the town forgetting. It's really awesome to see Freddy in a more modern film, and the kills are amazing due to the slashing nature of Jason mixed with the creative kills of Freddy. They're very selective with Freddy's kills in this one, more creative framing than pure special effects, but it's not as kooky as you'd hope, although they do go off the deep end once or twice, which you kind of have to be considered a Freddy film. So how does it all end? Freddy and Jason have a final hurrah where Freddy's head is taken off clean by Laurie, who shouts, "Welcome to my world, bitch." He really gets the Pamela Voorhees special, but the final scene does show Jason emerging from the water with Freddy's head, which winks at the camera. Honestly, I don't know if I'm gonna get roasted for this, but I didn't think that this film was as bad as I expected it to be. By no means does it take itself seriously, but it's a little bit more of a layered story than I expected. But in saying all of that, it is not winning any awards. It's just a pure fun popcorn horror for sure. So here's where it lands on my ranking. And now the time is here for the final entry thus far. It's 2010 and Freddy is back, but not like we've ever seen him before. This remake takes a darker look at Freddy, pulling all of the well-known elements from the original franchise without the goofiness and adding in a part that was always left out: Freddy's motive. In this film, he's officially known as a child predator, so things suddenly get a lot darker. Paired with a gloomy atmosphere, this isn't the Freddy we learn to outsmart. Here, Freddy is someone from our past that we fear. Jackie Earle Haley plays Freddy Krueger, and we have an interesting ensemble to pair, including Rooney Mara as Nancy, Kyle Gallner as Quentin, Katie Cassidy as Chris, and Connie Britton as Dr. Gwen, who is Nancy's mom. We follow these teens as they battle with repressed memories from when they were children and were abused by Freddy. It's revealed later in the film that a small group of them went to preschool together and were attacked by Freddy, who worked there as a gardener. The parents soon discovered what was happening and chased him into a warehouse and set fire to it with him inside. The film plays out a lot like an investigation as Nancy and Quentin try to uncover their memories to stop Freddy. The film has a completely different tone, which is expected because of the sick motive, which changes the dialogue to a sexual nature. It's a hard film to watch, I'm not gonna lie, but I did find it impressive the way that the film was able to transfer the perspective from one teen to the other. Every time you thought you had the main character, they would die. No one was safe, and it felt refreshingly eerie. But of course there's huge issues with this film, and my main issue is the way that Freddy's motive is presented and talked about. The mum, when revealing the story to Quentin and Nancy, goes a little bit too far by saying Nancy was his favorite, not something I would say when explaining to the child what happened to them. Then Quentin goes on a rampage wondering if it had happened at all or if they had all made it up, which of course is him in denial, but it's extremely intense and detailed, and for a slasher, some of the one-liners are repulsive, and there's a bed scene that is very intense. I feel like this film has a lot of mixed message for a very sensitive topic, and it flips the script on a once-beloved kooky villain. Craven expressed his displeasure in not being consulted fully for the film, while Robert Englund supported the remake and the new face of Freddy. Even though the film was met with negative reviews, given how different the energy was, it grossed over $117 million at the box office worldwide, making it the highest grossing film in the franchise. The film ends with a gory scene of Nancy defeating Freddy in the hideout. She then sets the place on fire, but she returns home mirroring the first film literally. We see Nancy's mom being pulled through a mirror, just like in The Door in 1984. So the ending again is left open. The theme for this one is the biggest difference in all of the entries because of the change of motive. Instead of teens trying to overcome their personal trauma, they are trying to remember it to understand what happened to them. But of course, it also plays off mental health, with the first death looking self-inflicted. It seems to work as a look at survivors and the trauma that they live with. Quentin has a great quote about this when the research comes up, saying that nightmares are triggered by the belief that the dreamer has no control, which is honestly a great way to sum up the entire series. We also deal with the parents in the opposite way, where in the past they were helpless when it came to defeating Freddy. In this one, they actively tried to erase the memory, being fully aware of the psychological damage. I get it, it does not feel like an Elm Street movie. So this is where I place this film. We do get a funeral and a couple of Easter eggs, and it's not even like I don't appreciate the new Freddy casting. It's just a completely different atmosphere. It could have been its own thing instead of reworking a beloved creative icon into something incredibly dark and disturbing. What a harsh ending. I honestly don't know how they could bring back the series given Nancy did die unless they did another meta film. Or Nancy was able to come back within a dream to battle Freddy from the other side. Maybe she got some dream demons of her own. How would you like to see the story continue from here, and would you? If you're looking for more information on Nightmare on Elm Street, I would really recommend the following documentaries: Never Sleep Again, Scream Queen, My Nightmare, and Fred Heads, which is dedicated to the fans. If you did enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up. It was a feat and I'm really glad I did it. I feel like I learned a lot and really consolidated all of my thoughts about Freddy, and honestly, I do want him to return. I don't think it would be a bad thing, especially with where we left off. It can only get better from here. If you'd like to support what I do here on my channel, you can join my Patreon. It's only $2 every month, and you'll be buying me basically a coffee each month saying thank you for the videos. You also get bonus videos, and if you'd like, you can join my Discord through there, or why not check out my merch store? It's just spookyastronauts.com. I hope you're all having a fantastic day. Stay spooky and have some sweet, sweet nightmares. Bye, friends.